Evaluating film has been a passion my whole life. Knowing what's made one player fit a system is what drove me to help assemble a championship roster. Now I want to let you know where you stand. We are searching for the top prospects and revealing what makes players' film so great. Are you brave enough for Athletic Audit? What's your score? Welcome back to the best podcast, video, show in the entire universe. I've got the one, the only Dane Stewart coming in. We've called games together. We've spent way too much time together, but it has been a blast. Some people call him the Chief. I call him the man, myth, and freaking legend. Dane, are you ready to get into Athletic Audit today?
Moose, I don't know, man. I'm used to me doing play-by-play and you adding color, and this feels kind of weird. You're doing play-by-play and I'm adding color. I don't really know what to do with my hands. This will be great. Let's dive in, Moose.
Oh, I freaking love it. So, Dane, we've gone back and forth on prospects for years, and we've been sitting there, we're like, man, that kid's an absolute baller. That kid's absolutely trash. And now we're going to figure out who's good, who's bad. And we all know some of them are ugly, but that's all right. We'll love them anyways. So we've got two running backs coming up. Let's do a little preview of them before we go into them. Starting with Jaylen Warren. You watched him live in high school. What did you think of Jaylen Warren before we break down the film?
Probably the most underrated high school player that I ever saw. I think to his detriment a little bit, he played behind one of the more talented offensive lines this state has ever seen. And so I think a lot of people had a lot of doubt about Jaylen Warren, but when you watch his game, I think he had a perfect blend of great vision, and obviously he had a phenomenal line to run behind. Great vision, speed that was not appreciated or not easy to see. I think a lot of people felt like they did not appreciate how fast he was in high school, and his physicality. Never got brought down by the first guy. And his balance and his ability to just continue to drive piles and to gain yards. There's a reason why, he ran behind an offense where he generated 3,000 yards on the ground. It was not all offensive line. It was a great team, but his yards after contact, his strength, his vision, his speed. He was the complete package to me. Very fitting with where he's at. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I thought this kid was an absolute stud and probably the most underappreciated high school player we've seen.
So we're going to talk about another underappreciated running back, a kid that doesn't have any offers yet, that I think should have a ton of offers. Yeah. Siaki Fekotoa. We watched him at first, and both of us looked at each other like, what is going on here? How is this kid running in the wrong size shoes, doing everything that he's doing? But let's do a little preview of him. What do you think about Siaki Fekotoa before we really break him down?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the body composition is very different from Jaylen Warren, but I think he brings some very similar elements. I think his speed is extremely impressive, Moose. And you talk about running the wrong size shoes. We were at that playoff game at Granger when we asked kind of what happened the last couple of weeks of the year. It felt like he finally found his footing, and that was literally so. It was a new pair of shoes. The next thing you know, this kid's one of the best running backs in the state, and just demonizing opposing defenses. I think he's really good out of the backfield, can catch the ball out of the backfield. He plays a lot more physical than you think. You look at him and you think he might be like an E.C. Sofele kind of kid, but he's a lot more physical than that. And obviously his speed in the open field is a challenge for defense to catch up with. I love this kid. I think he plays in a very balanced offense, so he probably doesn't get a lot of the love that a running back should. But man, he is a really, really talented player.
I feel like he truly was the difference, and he caused teams to have to stack the box. And that's what you want from a running back. Someone that forces a defense's hands to say, hey, we have to stop the run, and gives you those one-on-ones on the outside, gives you the one-on-one down the hash. It's just a beautiful thing. So, Dane, let's get in. Let's break down some of this film, and I want to see how you would rate Jaylen looking at his high school film, not where he's at right now, and why he ended up where he did. Dane, here comes Jaylen Warren. Like you said, 3,000 yards, 3,099 to be exact. He was 1 yard away from being an absolute legend. 39 touchdowns, 259 carries. But tell me a little bit about that offensive line. You said he had some good guys in front of him, right?
Yeah, I want to say it was either 4 or 5 guys up front that were all committed to go D1. And I couldn't tell you the names off the top of my head. but I know it was a very big offensive line. And it was, I think that offense, if I recall, that is the single season rushing record still to this date. And I think that offense in total set the total rushing yard mark in a single season. But it was a very talented offensive line. And a lot of people thought that was the credit to Jaylen's success. It was not, as we've all learned. Some of us knew that, back when he was playing. But it was a very, very good offensive line. George Miley was on that line. That's one name. There were a couple others that were on that line, but it was a good line.
There was a kid that went to Texas, Junior
Angilau. Yep.
And Joe Tukuafu, who played at BYU. Yep. I mean, you have a stacked offensive line. And me being at BYU and I was watching his film, that's the question I had to ask myself. It's almost like, are they too good in front of him? But alas, let's let the film talk for itself. So we're going to let the film really run, and seeing this offensive line, good move, Jaylen, by featuring the offensive line, saying none of this could have been done without Paul Miley and Junior Angilau and all these guys.
Yeah.
So starting out, we can see that we're going into a triple option offense, and he is dotting the I. He's at the top. So I anticipate him to just be a downhill runner starting before I even watch this film. You were absolutely right with first man's not taking him down, but he just bullied his way into the end zone. But right there is the big question mark for me, to be honest with you. It's his speed. And I didn't know this until recently, but he played the whole season on a pulled hamstring that was barely hanging on to the bone. When I'm watching an offensive lineman that's running just as fast as him, and that's my first play I watch.
And let's clarify. And that game is at De La Salle. That's not Olympus. That's at De La Salle. And by the way, he ran for 249 at De La Salle. And you see why, right? And you talk about just speed. No, there's shiftiness there, there's strength there, and there's speed where you're not going to catch him. Complete package, man.
Yeah. What's weird is in my mind, that was Olympus. And De La Salle, this East team was the first team to beat De La Salle in like 199 games.
It was
crazy.
And it came down to a game-winning field goal. But for me, win or loss, he ran for 250 against that defense. He ran for 250, 249 to be exact. But that's at De La Salle.
Yeah. Going to De La Salle, doing what he's doing. But this is a recruiter, makes me question his speed when I see a guy coming all the way from over here. Is he slowing up? Why is he slowing up? What's going on? And you can see his hand reach for his hamstring a little bit, just being ginger with it. And he's still running through guys' face. That's the crazy thing about Jaylen Warren. He's still dominating, even though he's playing hurt. He's not injured, he's hurt. And I think a lot of these kids need to understand the difference between playing injured and playing hurt. So right here, we can tell it's at Rice Eccles, and great blocking, beats his one-on-one, has the vision to get to where he needs to be. And that's what I love to see from him. It's the vision. It's the cutback lanes. It's understanding his assignment, and it's doing everything he needs to do right there. That first contact, beautiful stiff arm. I just want to watch this again. Just, okay, here's the tackle. You got it, buddy? No, you don't. Good night. Oh. And don't you love seeing the snow there, Dane?
I was going to say, I think that's against Springville, if I recall correctly. And I'll tell you this. Before that game, I was talking with Coach Brandon Mattich, and I said, Coach, this should be a good one, because he's like, no, we're gonna steamroll them. Like, oh, okay. And when you got a back like Jaylen Warren, you talk about it. Stiff arm, like, you're not just going to bring him down. You got to wrap him up. You got to be able to use your size and your strength to tackle him. He's a load.
Yeah. But once again, speed is still a question in the back of my head. If I was just watching this for the first time, I'm like, is this kid really a burner? I know he can run through guys, but is he going to run through guys at the next level with the same tenacity, with the same strength, is the question I have to ask myself.
So, and I'll speak to that as we go through this. I'll tell you, there was a time when I learned that, but we'll see if he's got it in his highlight reel. We'll continue on.
Even the start was really interesting. We see running backs now like Ashton Genty, and his stance is very unique, standing straight up. Jaylen Warren he's almost just looking at the field, and you see that pause right there, the almost track start, like, let's go. And it's just interesting to watch the little things he does. What I love about Jaylen is this is his high school film. His JUCO film got better. His D1 film got better. His Power 4 film got better. He's a kid that wasn't satisfied with where he was.
Kid had to work for everything. And there's a couple stories. I don't want to get them wrong, so I'm probably not going to share a ton of them. But this young man has had to work for everything that he has earned in life. High school, he doesn't have an offer. He's got to go the JUCO route, and then he transfers to Utah State, and then he transfers again. He had to work and prove level by level that this kid could play. You talk about his stance moves. I wonder how much that played into it too, just because it is a unique offense. It is kind of a unique way to start at the snap. How well does that translate, especially as offenses at this time were really converting to the spread. Want to see more athleticism out of the backfield, not necessarily the physical back like he showed he can be. I wonder if that had a bit to play with it. But again, for me, it's, it looks like the angle's there. And, it's like, well, you can have the angle, but if you can't bring him down, it doesn't matter, right? And that's, again, this is in the semifinal, I believe this one is, but that's where, for me, it's just like he's got enough speed. He may not be, your 4.4 kid, but he's got enough speed with his combination of physicality. It's like, yeah, it's still a winning recipe in my book. But
it absolutely is. When a kid like this gets in the right offense, there's nothing that can stop him.
Right.
But when you're a college coach, you're like, what's the difference between a 4.4 and a 4.6? Because Jaylen Warren, he was running a 4.6, 4.7 in high school. And for what I classify him as a speed back. He's 5'10", 215 pounds. That's a big back.
It is.
But I'm just clarifying in my head. I'm like, he's probably about an inch shorter. I think he's a speed back, because a big back, you're looking for a guy that's 6'2", almost that full back situation. And with his height, you're like, I'm looking for a speed back from him.
Yeah, and I think, that's a fair point in terms of, where would he fit inside of an offense? Because I think in high school, you could make the argument he was kind of a tweener, because he had kind of enough speed, but not, blistering speed, but physicality is there. So I think that's fair. But for me, there's just enough. I mean, I'll tell you the play just to get to it, but you'll see, even here, it's like, look, I know everyone loves a 40 time, and I get it. But, man, there's more to it than that. You talk about shiftiness, cut back, like vision, right? Yeah, he's got blockers here, but he knows he's not going to finish this play run up the middle. So he actually goes away from that. Again, you got enough speed to be able to finish it off. For me, just that combination, in my mind, made up for it. But how about that? Little bulldozer there.
So that's what I love, the unselfishness when you find a running back that is running in a triple option, where it's like, I just got to hit someone every single down. Doesn't matter who, if it's an unsuspecting safety or not.
Well, and here's the deal. He knows how many times he's going to get matched up with that safety, and a majority of the time he's going to have the ball. So why not send a message when you don't, right? Be like, hey, when I had the ball, just remember this hit. Boom!
My goodness. How many times is Paul Miley just running into the end zone, just not blocking anyone? You'd think he has the ball half the time.
Jaylen should have given him the ball once or twice, huh? Shared some of the yards, the touchdowns. Come on.
Goodness. This is what I love. That. So Jaylen, his ability to come in, understand that the play is dead here for 99% of running backs.
Yep.
Right here. It's over.
And look at that. There's even help there. Doesn't matter.
That's what makes the difference between good and great running backs.
Let me see if this is it or not. Yeah, that's not the exact play, but there's a play, because I'm standing right in that end zone in that very game, and that's when I was like, he's got enough speed. And it was when he ran away from a 4-star Chaz Ayu. And when I saw that play, I was like, okay, he's going to be just fine at the next level when it comes for speed.
Yeah. This is the question, but realize he's doing this on a pulled hamstring.
Yep.
That is my question right there. And it's not a big question. We know what happened to this kid, where he ended up, how his future played out. But this is what you guys have to realize as a high school athlete. colleges are looking for reasons not to take you. They're looking for any chink in your armor. And if you show anything, they're going to try to exploit that because they're going to say, is it worth taking you versus this other kid? And I think that's what happened to Jaylen. So I've seen a lot of him. Are you ready to rate him with me?
Sure, let's do it.
So Dane, we're going to break it down every little section. We get this from Recruiting for Parents, you guys. If you guys haven't checked that out, go for it so you guys can know how colleges will rate you. But starting with Jaylen Warren, East 2027, 5'9", 215 pounds was his official measurement. My goodness. That dude is a thick young man.
Yes.
My God.
Yes.
So, like we said, 3,099 yards, 39 touchdowns, and we classified him as a speed back because we can't quite give him that big back distinction being 5'9". So let's start with endurance. His endurance, I think he did a really good job with that. I gave him an 8 out of 10. He played the same or better at the end of games, but I saw him kind of faltering. I don't know if that was the injury or not. And I wish I would have known that he was injured while I was recruiting at BYU. It would have made a world of difference. Leadership. What do you think about the score of 10 for him?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there was no doubt when they needed to play, Jaylen Warren could make that play for them. So, obviously, I think when you're a running back, your success is in the hands of your team. Be that the quarterback, you talk about all the mesh points in that offense, or the offensive line. I mean, you made mention how often Paul Miley's down the field just running wide open. They don't do that for a guy they don't respect and that they don't think is a good leader. I would agree. I think his leadership was probably pretty spectacular as a high school player.
So change of direction, I gave him an 8 out of 10. There's some things in there that I was like, oh, you missed that. What do you think about 8 out of 10 for change of direction?
I mean, I think the change of direction could have been maybe a little quicker. But I think he did a good job of recognizing when to make a change in direction and being able to see it and hit it. Even though it may not have the snappiness that you may like out of a speed back. I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at with an 8. But if I were to give a criticism, it'd probably be that at times it maybe took a little extra time for that change of direction to come.
For vision, I gave him an 8. At times he just relies on his strength. And he just likes to run through guys instead of making that extra cut. And I think that kind of went both ways. He is a strong young man. If I was 215 pounds, 5'10", in high school, 5'9", I would be doing things similar to this young man. Not really, but he absolutely dominated. And I think that his patience, I think because of the offense he played in, he was like one cut and up. And that's your job, and that's what you do. And he knew where he was going. So I was kind of putting my college thinking hat on and saying, hey, if I was in college, would he have the ability to slow it down, to really wait for this offense to develop? Because when you're talking to a Brandon Matic, it's just, let's run right down their throat,
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I think mentality plays into that a little bit. I mean, it'd be hard for me to it'd be hard for me to bring down his vision score because so much of it is that. It's like, look, hit the hole, bam, and go. And some of that is, you talk about being 5'9", 215. Look, man, it's fun to pop kids, right? I mean, it's fun to go up and just hit a defender and lower the pads and make him feel you. So, I can understand a little bit what you're saying. It'd be hard for me to knock him down too much over that because I think some of that is just the nature of his role in that offense and kind of the way in which he plays. But I wouldn't be too harsh at giving him an 8.
Yeah, the hard thing for me, hands and route running, I could only do a 6. I didn't see him run any routes. He wasn't asked to do that. I didn't see him catch anything. Yeah,
it is hard to evaluate that in that offense in particular. I mean, I think that offense ran for over 6,000 yards, and he had half of it. And again, you've got 3 backs that are getting the ball and a quarterback who will run it. They don't throw it, or they hadn't thrown it very often in that offense. So that would be a really tough one to judge. I don't even know where I'd go for a score on that.
Yeah, I just did 6s because I'm like, you know what? I know he can do it, and I saw what he did at the next level. But coming out of high school, you have to put a grade on a kid.
Yeah.
And that's where doing 7-on-7s and stuff like that, if you are in an offense like this, it's like, oh, that kid can run routes. That kid does do this. He does do all that stuff. So I really like it. So burst, let's be honest here. That was a 10. Just bam, bam. Thank you, man. Blocking, I missed the blocking. I'm going to change his score, and I'm going to give him a 10. And I am going to repent from my sin and show that I actually love his blocking, everything he's doing, and that changes everything for me.
Yeah, I think in that offense again, in that position, you don't block a ton.
No.
That offense is all about deception, and it's about doing your job. And in that position, a lot of it is deception. I would, if he were in an offense where he had to block, yeah, that's a 10. I have no doubt about his ability to block. Didn't in high school either.
Yeah, just his headhunting ability on the safety, I'm like, this kid loves to block. He loves to hit, and he loves to get things open. Grit, what do you got for that?
Oh, I'm a 12 for Grit. Again, I think just his yards after contact, I don't know what it is. But man, how many plays did we watch, Moose, where there's contact at the line of scrimmage and he takes it for 15, 20, 40 yards? Dan Campbell would love this young man.
He would. Speed, this is what dinged him for me.
It dinged him for a lot of people. And again, I'll say it again. I was playoff game. They're playing Timpview. He ran away from Chaz Ayu. And look, I have no idea if Chaz was going full steam or not. No clue. But that was a 4-star kid in high school. And Jaylen Warren ran away from him. So for me, that was the one that answered all questions for me about speed. It was like, if you can run away from a 4-star safety, I'm not worried about speed. I've obviously talked about the combination of the tool set he has. 6 for me was too low. I know people were critical of that. For me, there's 40 time and there's game speed. He had plenty of game speed. For me, that's an 8. I would have no problem bumping that up.
Okay. And then tackle breaking, I put him at a 10.
12. Yeah, that's another 12.
So that gives us a grand total of a .8333 repeated, which is a really good score. So that's kind of like a low tier FCS. We're looking at coming out at that time, maybe like a Weber State or like an SUU or a Utah Tech type situation. But they all had the questions that we had coming out of that. So I want you to tell me what happened to his career after that, Dane.
Yeah, well, I'm a Utah State alum. I was hoping that that program would offer him. They didn't. He had to go the JC route. So Jaylen Warren ended up at Snow College, just put his head down and went to work. And that's one thing that you'll learn about that kid whenever you talk to him or you talk to his family. You'll appreciate his work ethic. That kid just went to work at Snow College and was able to turn that into an offer at Utah State. Went up to Utah State, was there for a couple of years before transferring his senior year to Oklahoma State. And after finishing off as a Cowboy, found himself at the Pittsburgh Steelers, which, for me, the thing I loved about Jaylen Warren, and it's not an exact match, but you talk about combination of power and speed, breakaway. For me, it was like, is there any better offense for him? Like, he is a modern day Jerome Bettis. He doesn't have the size that Jerome Bettis did, but for me, he reminds me of kind of how Jerome Bettis played. I watched 36 growing up all the time for Pittsburgh. And so for me, kind of felt like that's a little bit of what Jaylen was in high school, obviously a younger version and not as big of a version. But you talk about that combination. So just a young man who had to go through the various levels from JC to, lower Division I, and then on to, at the time, Power 5 and now into the NFL.
Yeah, his story is really intriguing to me. He shared a backfield with Najee Harris, who was almost a consensus number 1 overall running back. Yeah. He was a kid that everyone's like, this is a can't miss. And Najee Harris, his hand got forced. He had to split carries with Jaylen Warren. He's like a rock in your shoe. He just doesn't go away. He's a little pesky, and he just gets it done. I love to see Jaylen Warren. And he reminds me a lot of this next running back we're going to talk about. So the big thing with this show is I want to show you guys the next star, the next Jaylen Warren. And this is a kid that I think is the next Jaylen Warren. We're going to be talking about Siaki Fekotoa now. 27 season touchdowns. We're talking 20 rushing and 7 receiving. So this is more of the speed back that we come to think about. He's a little shorter than Jaylen, is listed at 5'8", 185 pounds. So that makes me think he's got to be a little bit quicker on his feet. And you're going to see that, Dane. First play, out of the backfield. I love to see that. Beautiful route, fantastic hands. But he is a little bit slight is the thing that makes me question it. Can this kid handle some hits? Does his body have room to grow? We see his arms right here. He's not filled out at all like Jaylen was. Jaylen was a tank. Yeah. And Siaki, it's like, can he handle in between the tackles is my biggest question.
Go ahead.
There's the answer.
that was the answer. And I agree, right? I think he is probably more of a prototypical quote unquote speed back, but then you have other questions to answer, and is that physicality, right? Can he bring it? Can he create extra yards? Can he handle the contact that comes play after play from running between the tackles? Yeah,
with speed backs, you always question his toughness. Playing Viewmont this year, he ended up breaking his arm, and he still played throughout the whole season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good sign when you talk about toughness. But here's the other thing too. There's the guys who want to bulldoze you, like a Jaylen Warren, and there are the guys who are like, hey, I don't have to. I'm going to extend my season a little bit. And not that Jaylen couldn't do that, but you talk about his elusiveness in these videos. Look, he may be running through the tackles, but he recognizes his ability to read angles, read defenses, and be able to get around defenders where he doesn't have to absorb so much contact is one of his great strengths.
This play right here, it screams speed back. Break your tackle and no one's touching you, even if they have the angle. That's such a beautiful play right there, where this is the speed I come to expect when recruiting a speed back.
And this is where they're different, right? Because Jaylen Warren, when he takes that carry, he's lowering his shoulder on that linebacker and he's just mowing him over, and then he's finishing, where it's the point I was trying to make earlier. Fekitoa was like, I got the angle, I'm going to get around him, and then I'll finish it.
Look at that
offense. That juke. Yeah.
He's the most trusted receiver on the team, you can tell. Emerson Geilman, BYU quarterback right there. Oh my gosh. Speechless. That's all I can say.
I mean, that's unfair. I mean, you have the safety coming downhill, that little step inside. Seen him do that a number of times.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying, Emerson Geilman, when your number one target is Siaki Fekotoa, it's a good thing.
And I think that's where, again, the difference between these two, Fekitoa is more of a true speed back. We kind of put Jaylen Warren as a speed back because of his size, right? Because he wasn't as tall as some of those more power backs. And so you're kind of, put him in a spot where typically a player like a Fekitoa is going to run it differently, but it's just as successful. I mean, here's a great job getting that edge where that play's supposed to go inside.
Yep. And you can see his cast on right now. I've said to a lot of people, I can do it better with one hand tied behind my back. Fekitoa proved it on that run right there.
Well, in fairness, the arm was in front of a Moose. I mean, come on.
Here's the other thing. He doesn't care who's in front of him.
Yeah.
He became the low man on that play right there. Yeah. Diving at the safety's kind of lower half, and I love to see that. He's like, low man wins, and I'm going to beat him.
There was no denial on this play. And for me, when you talk about the physicality, it's, are you willing to just lower your pads and go gain a yard when you got to gain a yard? And that play right there screams yes. Here's the thing, too. Let's go back to that last one, Moose. Watch this. So he's in the flat. Here comes linebacker to push him out of bounds. You aren't pushing Fekitoa. So you'd ask about, a little bit slighter than a Jaylen Warren, but still plenty strong. I mean, look, he barely even comes off his line as he's running down that sideline. Linebacker thinks he's just going to push him out of bounds. Look, he hardly even moves a foot.
The other thing is the linebacker angle he's taking is atrocious because he's like, oh, I'm faster than this kid. You're not.
Yeah.
Great job right there. This is why I love watching Siaki. He just makes his team better because he can do it in the backfield. He can do it from receiving. He can block. He can do anything. Let's watch that one.
And that's the point. Where's he starting that? He's not in the backfield there, right? This is fly sweep. Fantastic job of getting him the ball in different ways. You got to love that versatility. And because of his ability to catch the ball, as we've seen a couple times, you got to guard him outside. So if you got to match up with him outside, now you're bringing him across the formation in a running play. You've got a numbers advantage from the get-go.
Just the vision. This is what I see when I'm like, oh, this is beautiful right there. He had a lane right here, and he's like, no, that's breaking down. Let's bounce it outside. If my guy on the outside can get a block, we're set.
But even on that play, he sets up the block that really springs him loose by his little step inside. He kind of waits a little bit for that receiver to get in better positioning to create that lane between the two blockers, be able to take it up the rest of the way.
And I love the connection of Emerson and Siaki because of this. Oh, you forgot about
hang on.
the running back?
Moose, wasted steps at the end there. I mean, he takes 2 steps inside. Look, save the energy, young man. We're just kidding you, Siaki.
No, I love it. And that's a beautiful play design. Everything went great right there. And it's just fun to see where it's like, oh, you need to pay attention to that young man right there because something special is going to happen.
I know we're talking about Fekitoa here, but how many of these plays do you see wide receivers locked up on defenders? You got to give a lot of credit to the wideouts for Bountiful in this offense this year because they helped spring Siaki for a lot of extra yards and extra points for those Redhawks and en route to their state championship.
Yeah, unlike Jaylen Warren, Siaki has to create a lot of running lanes for himself. He doesn't have the biggest line. They scheme really well. They're very disciplined, but they're not bullying the other team. They don't have 5 Division I commits sitting on their offensive line.
Yeah, Jaylen Warren, and I don't say this to knock him, but with that offensive line, it was literally sometimes, 8-10 feet wide, the running lanes. Siaki does not have that. Now, they'll scheme it through the passing attack and whatnot, but you see, even there, it doesn't look like that's a huge hole. Somehow he finds his way through, and then he's off to the races.
Yeah, it's about the size of a needle that a camel couldn't get through right there.
Yeah. Again, how many times out of the backfield do you see him run that little wheel route wide open? Oh, there's your physicality, huh?
Yeah. This is a kid, I just don't understand why everyone isn't hopping and being like, hey, we see another Jaylen Warren type kid. He's someone that in the state championship games, I was thoroughly impressed with. I was like, wow, this is the kid that's getting this team going and makes a huge difference for him.
Well, and I don't know if some of it's just the balance, right? Emerson Geilman, I know that he's committed to BYU. That's a player that I think is really good. And I don't know if it's just kind of the presence of the entire offensive unit was just stable. And so it was just, not really a standout, going to go carry the ball 40 times every week. That has maybe, contributed to that lack of recruiting. But my opinion is if you're a Weber State, what are you waiting on? Right? This is a kid in your own backyard. You can get him. And you saw what a Josh Davis did for Weber State. To me, that's the kid that when you're like, yeah, we're going to compare him. I'm like, Josh Davis. To me, this is Josh Davis. And again, he was that same year with Jaylen Warren. But I'm like, man, why wouldn't you offer that kid who ended up being a freshman player of the year for FCS? I always get that wrong. But to me, it's like his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, his speed, his vision. Moose, I'm with you, man. I don't know.
I think that's a great comparison too. Josh Davis went to the greatest high school in America, Alta.
There it is.
But Jaylen Warren, here's the thing. There's so many great running backs that have come out of the state, and they're all different. Jaylen Warren's very different than an Ula Tolutau, who's very different than a Susan Shakarin, who's very different than a Harvey Longy, who's very different than an EC Sofili. And here's the deal. These kids are getting better. They're getting better training. They look better. And I think that Siaki Fekotoa is the next guy in a long line of phenomenal running backs and just needs one coach to be like, oh my gosh, I haven't watched this film yet. And now I have, and this is going to be special. So are you ready to rate him?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Siaki Fekotoa, Bountiful High School, 9 years later, 2026. My goodness, how time flies.
Yeah.
5'8", 185, 2,199 all-purpose yards and 27 touchdowns. So he's not getting it all done on the ground, but I love to see what he did. I love to see the 20 rushing touchdowns to the 7 receiving. I love to see how he did it. So endurance from him, I gave him a 10 on endurance. I don't know how you do that.
No, me too. I think one of the other things we didn't talk about with Jaylen Warren, he didn't play a lot of full games because they had such large leads at halftime that, the endurance thing, you didn't really get to see it a lot. You did see it with Fekitoa. And I think even the load that he had to carry, particularly in the state tournament, I think showed, his ability to endure. And you talk about his ability to fight through injury. I think his endurance was fantastic.
So I gave him a 10. Leadership, I gave him a 10. So we did see him get hurt, but he came back. He gave everything he could to the team, and they rallied around him. And when he couldn't play, he inspired his team. And that's what I think a good leader does.
Yeah, I think his team respected him a lot. I think there were really strong leaders with Bountiful these last couple of years. I mean, some of the stories, when you go talk to that staff, you'll appreciate the kind of leadership that they had amongst their players. And I think Fekitoa was one of those who could stand up and get his team going. That was a team that had a lot of leadership, not just Siaki, but plenty of others who were like, no, we're going to go do this. It's been that way the last couple of years under Coach Freck, and it's one of the reasons why they've been in back-to-back state championship games.
So, change of direction, I gave him a 9.
Yeah, I'm probably good with that. I think that he is a little more shifty than when we were talking about Jaylen Warren. I say maybe the speed of Jaylen Warren's ability to cut. You could see a little quicker transition. I think for Siaki, as we're watching that film, pretty apparent. Very, very light on his feet.
So vision, I gave him a 9 as well.
Yep.
Ability to choose the right hole, super solid in that. Patience, I gave him an 8, just because I've watched a lot of full games of his, and I'm like, if he would have just waited 1 second to let the blocks develop. But in the same breath, he doesn't have 4 or 5 Division I guys in front of him. He has to make quick choices.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead.
It's something that he's going to have to develop at the next level.
I agree. And I think that's been improving, right? I mean, I think back to when we watched him as a junior, I think you saw that a little bit more. I think this last year you saw that get better. I think he is working on that and will continue to turn that into a more natural attribute. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some opportunity for him to be able to let things develop a little bit more. If it's there and he hits it, boom, I mean, it's trouble. But he can get maybe a little over anxious.
And remember, we're comparing Jaylen Warren's senior film to Siaki Fekotoa's junior film.
Fair.
Which is super unfair by me, and I don't care. Hands, I gave him an 8 on hands. I could have been 9, but I gave him an 8. Route running, gave him an 8 as well. He's a solid outlet. He does a great job.
The thing I'm curious, go ahead.
And for him to get a 10, I'd have to see him in the slot a lot more. And as a kid that I'm like, hey, if you wanted to go with an empty backfield, I would feel confident as him operating out of the slot every play.
Yeah, the question I would have is contested catches, right? A lot of the catches we're looking at, he's wide open, right? He doesn't have a defender within 5-10 yards. When he's covered, what's his ability to bring that catch in? I'm trying to think. I don't recall seeing it a ton. I know I've seen it, but the ones that come to mind are the ones like we had where it's, he's wide open and that's a catch and he's able to take it to the house. So that'd be the one thing for me in rating his hands is just his ability to make that when covered.
Yeah. Is he climbing the ladder? Is he making those difficult catches? What's his catch radius? It's questions I don't have answered from this short film.
Sure.
Burst for me, I gave him a 10. So I thought his burst was even a little better than Jaylen's, to be honest with you, because he's lighter. But can he put on weight and keep the burst is my question.
Yeah, that's a big question. And look, he will have to put on some weight. You hope that it's good weight, right? Obviously. But yeah, will that slow him down or will he be able to maintain that same agility and quickness in his decision-making, cutting, etc.? I like it for a 10 with where it's at, given where his physical state is. But that's something he's going to have to make sure that he keeps and maintains as he continues to mature physically.
Blocking, I gave him a 6 because I didn't see any blocking film. I know he's physical. I know he can do it. But if a kid doesn't put blocking film on there, it makes me question if they love blocking. I know he likes being physical. I don't know if he loves blocking yet, and I'd have to see that in the film.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that may be scheme-based as well. We talk about, if he's 5'8", 185, right? You're trying to protect him, keep him healthy. Obviously, you have a broken hand. You don't want to subject him to too much contact where he is such a prevalent piece of your offense. So that may be some scheme as well. But to your point, I don't remember seeing him a lot pass protection or even out, helping other guys get open. Not that he hasn't done that or can't do it. I'm just trying to think, and feels like most of the time he's the feature, right? So I don't know that we've really seen it.
Yep. And then grit, I gave him a 10. I love his play. I think he's awesome. His speed, I gave him an 8. 4.5 is what he's running, is what it's reported, which is amazing. I mean, 8 for that. Tackle breaking, I gave him a 10 as well. He's so light on his feet. He's so hard to tackle. This is a kid I really like. So after breaking it down, looking at all the stats and everything, he got a .883. And with that, that's really like your high FCS, low G5, a kid that people really should be aware of. This is a fantastic score for a running back. And of course, there's going to be coaches that are like, oh, I think this should be lower, this should be higher. But let's say a couple things are lower. And he's a .85. That's still amazing. And this is a kid coming out of high school. I don't think he's going to have to go the JUCO route. I think he's a kid that you could put in the slot. You could do a lot of things with. And he runs those end arounds beautifully. He is a mismatch in offense, and he's a kid that you're going to want if you're running a 10 personnel.
Yeah, I think he does have to figure out a way to put on a little more meat, right? I mean, even if you're going to go play top end FCS, you look at a lot of the top end FCS teams, they're playing FBS teams and they're doing it multiple times. You're going to have a way to be able to absorb that and be able to continue to play through the rest of the year healthy. So he is going to have to put on a little bit more muscle and strength. But look, the reality is he's still a high school kid. To your point, he's a junior. So he's still got another year weightlifting. And once you bring him on a campus and you've got him on a meal plan, nutrition plan, a lifting program, like he has a frame that you can put weight on, I think. Now, look, he's not going to turn into a 215 back unless he grows a little bit more. And I have no idea if that's in the cards for him or not. But look, you can still beef him up a little bit. And then the question would be, is he still able to have the same speed and agility he's got right now? But Moose, I'm with you. I think this kid certainly has a spot in the FCS. I think there's a number of teams within the state of Utah should be looking at him. I think even regionally, you look at FCS programs. Look, you got to get outside your own state. You'll see some helmets behind me. They should be looking at him. There's a lot of teams should be looking at this young man because he is very versatile in what he can bring to your offense. And be it out of the backfield, being out as a receiver, you can still get the ball in his hands a lot of different ways. And he is a playmaker. So I'm with you. I think this kid has a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, I love the comparison to Josh Davis. I think the Jaylen Warren, Josh Davis, I still know coaches that are kicking themselves and they're like, we're idiots for not taking those kids in our first opportunity. Yep. And you're going to see the same thing with Siaki. But I love doing this. I love getting exposure to these kids, helping people understand breaking down film and what colleges are actually looking for. You may be dominant in 1A, and that's cool. But what skill set do you have? What do you have? If you guys want to be on the Athletic Audit, hit us up, hit me up, MooseB90 on Twitter. Dane is always a great person to hit up. He does so many good things, calling games in football, basketball, baseball, competitive dance, everything under the sun. Just a legend in his own time. Dane, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Great to be here with you, Moose, and appreciate the beautiful period there at the end. So great to see you, brother. And hey, football, it's not far away, man, right around the corner.
Oh, just a couple more months. I am sitting here on pins and needles, just excited as I can get. Evaluating film has been a passion my whole life. Knowing what's made one player fit a system is what drove me to help assemble a championship roster. Now I want to let you know where you stand. We are searching for the top prospects and revealing what makes players' film so great. Are you brave enough for Athletic Audit? What's your score?